There's a man who keeps showing up outside my window, and he keeps making baby noises. It started 2 weeks ago, the faint cries of a baby coming from outside my window, probably 50 or so feet in my backyard, which my window overlooks. At first, I was able to turn my fan up and block it out, but after a couple of nights, it grew louder or closer. Attempts to look out my window failed to find its source, and it was far too loud to try and ignore. Finally, one night, I saw the silhouette of a man, and I seized my chance. After throwing on a coat and slippers to go meet this creep, I suddenly realized how dangerous this was. Some strange man making crying baby sounds in my backyard. I grabbed my baseball bat and proceeded to the back door. When I opened the back door, a wall of rain greeted me. It was pouring, sheets of water slapping against the porch and pooling around my feet. Moments ago, the sky had been clear. Now it felt like a storm had rolled in, just for me. I tightened the grip of my baseball bat and stepped out, the cold soaking through my slippers almost instantly.
Hey!
I shouted into the darkness. The word barely made it past my lips. The rain swallowed it whole, turning my voice into a muffled echo that died before it reached the trees. Through the curtain of water, I could just make out the silhouette again, standing exactly where the cries had been coming from, motionless, watching. I raised the bat and slammed it against the fence, the sharp crack cutting through the rain.
I'm warning you!
I shouted, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to.
Get the hell out of here!
The figure didn't move at first, just stood there, drenched and still. Then, slowly, he turned and walked off into the darkness, his outline fading behind the curtains of rain until it was gone. I stayed there for a moment, listening. Nothing but the downpour. My heart was hammering, but I told myself it was over. I went back inside, locked the door, and peeled off my soaked slippers. By the time I lay back down, the steady hum of my fan almost lulled me into thinking it had been a dream. Then the crying started again. Louder this time, sharper. I froze. It was right outside my window. My hand shook as I reached for the blinds, the sound growing more grotesque with every second. I yanked them open and there he was. His face was pressed against the glass, rainwater streaking down the pale, sickly skin. His eye sockets were sunken and dark, like pits carved into his skull. And that smile, wide, unnatural, stretching ear to ear, wrapped as he let out another wailing, infant-like cry. I stumbled backwards, tripping over the edge of my rug as I scrambled for my phone. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it.
There's someone outside of my house!
I yelled into the receiver. The operator tried to calm me down, said officers were on the way, but every second felt like an hour. I kept my eyes locked in the window the whole time. The man, he didn't move, just kept pressing his face against the glass, that awful grin frozen in place. Then, as the wail of distant sirens finally reached my ears, he turned and vanished into the dark. The police, they took forever to arrive. By then, the rain had stopped completely. The air was heavy and still, the kind of silence that feels wrong after a storm. They swept the yard, checked the fence, even looked around the trees. Nothing. Just muddy footprints leading up to my window, prints that seemed to fade and disappear halfway back towards the woods. They told me it'd probably been a prank, maybe someone passing through. I nodded and pretended to believe them. When they left, the house, it felt emptier than ever. I lay back down, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was over. For a while, it was quiet. Then came the sound again. The baby's cry. Closer. I sat up, furious and terrified all at once. Enough, I muttered, flipping on the lights. That's when I saw them. Muddy footprints, leading across my carpet, right up to the closet door. The crying was louder now, coming from inside. I stood there, staring at the closet, my breath shallow. The sound of that awful crying still leaking out from behind that door. My hand tightened around the bat as I took slow, cautious steps towards the floorboards creaking under my feet. When I finally reached the handle, I hesitated, just long enough to hate myself for it. Then, I yanked the door open. The crying stopped. Inside, on the closet floor, lay something small and wet. I squinted, leaning closer. It wasn't a baby, it wasn't even human. It was a tiny, half-formed bird. Pink skin stretched thin, its wings barely developed, trembling slightly as if it's alive. A baby bird fetus. I stumbled back, disgusted and confused. What the hell? The smell hit me next. Something sour and metallic, and I covered my mouth trying not to gag. Then a sound from behind me made my blood run cold. I whipped my head around. My bed had moved, bouncing once hard enough to rattle the frame. Then the blanket began to shift, as if something underneath was crawling, pushing its way up. The fabric stretched and lifted, slowly spreading over a single human-sized lump right in the center. The baby's cry shot into my ears, so sharp and close it felt like it came from inside my head, right against my eardrum. The sound burst through me, rupturing something deep within. I screamed, and I clutched my ears as warm blood began to run down my neck, thick and hot against my skin. Still half bent over, I stared at the bed. The lump under the blanket was moving again, slowly rising and falling as if it were breathing. I didn't have my bat. I'd drop it somewhere near the closet, and my phone was my only weapon left. I grabbed it, but the screen was dead, black, reflecting only my shaking face. Panic took over without thinking. I hurled it at my bed. The second it hit, a pale, bony hand shot out from underneath the blanket. Impossibly fast, it snatched the phone midair and slammed it into the floor, the cracking of shattering glass echoing through the room. Then came the sound again, high-pitched. Gurgling baby noises, layered and distorted as if dozens of tiny throats were crying all at once from inside the mattress. Suddenly, the blanket began to bulge and writhe. One by one, tiny shapes pushed their way out from underneath, then trembled onto the floor with wet, heavy thuds. Dozens of them. Ash-white babies, their skin almost translucent under the light, eyes sealed shut, yet still crying. Each sound piercing and unnatural, they began crawling towards me, their little limbs jerking in unnatural rhythms, their cries overlapping into a deafening chorus. I stumbled back, kicking at the floor, but there were too many. Cold, slick hands clung to my legs, my arms, my clothes. I tried to scream as they climbed higher, their mouths opening wide, too wide. And then the biting started. Tiny teeth sank into my skin, my arms, my neck, my face. I swung and thrashed, but they kept coming. The room echoed with the shrill, endless sounds of crying. And then everything stopped. The sound, the movement, the pain. The room was still. The biting, the screaming, and all of it, it was gone. I blinked. I blinked through tears of blood, chest heaving, and realized that sunlight was slipping through the blinds. Morning. The floor was empty. No babies, no hands, just the wreckage of my room, blood on my carpet, my shattered phone beside the bed, and muddy prints fading into nothing. I don't remember much after that. I managed to get myself to the hospital, where they treated my wounds and ran tests. The cuts didn't make sense, they said, but they stitched me up and told me to rest. Now I'm home again. The house feels too quiet. My ears still throb where the drum bursts, and I swear, sometimes I can hear faint crying when I close my eyes. The sun's going down soon, and I'm scared of what tonight has to bring.